is,
Okay, give me 1 second. Is it live now?
what's that?
Is it on now?
Yeah, it is. Alright, sorry about that. We had a little bit of a technical snafu. So somebody did get some good news today, so.
Yes, he did.
Nope, it stopped again. Oh, okay. Must be my phone then. I'll take my phone off the. Okay, there. I took my phone off the Wi-Fi. I'll have to unplug that Sunday. So. Is it just my phone?
No,
Huh?
it says we're live. No.
Okay, we are now. I don't know what's going on. Hopefully it quits acting up.
No.
So,
You're good.
okay, so we're gonna just keep going because for some reason my phone's acting up. I wonder if I have to reset my phone.
Do we have Xfinity?
We do.
Okay, you know what? We have been having trouble. We do too. That's we got our computer and whatever you call it.
TV and all that stuff.
Yes, and we are having all kinds of trouble with it.
Yeah, so anyway, so we will just keep rolling and restart my phone. We'll see if it. So you did get good news today, so.
Yep. Today, we are going to be doing the 3rd chapter of Titus, which is the end of Titus. So we will be ending what we started, and it's a good way to end things for a couple of weeks, because a week from today, I will be going in to have my gallbladder removed. So I finally got a surgical date, everything is set, and I'm finally going to get rid of this tube in my gut, draining into this bag on my leg, and hopefully get back to some semblance of normal soon. So yes, I did get good news.
So, and I would like to, today's Veterans Day, so I would like to, a shout out to all my, shout out a happy Veterans Day to all of my brothers and sisters in uniform.
Absolutely.
Those of us who have wore the country's uniform, no matter what uniform it was. So,
Yep.
you know, even you jarheads who prefer a healthy diet of crayons. So, anyways, on that note, we're going to go on to Titus.
Titus number 3. Yep.
So, Titus, in the 3rd chapter, he talks to Titus about works and submission.
He addresses the responsibility that has been entrusted in Titus, But in all of the letters that he has written to the various leaders of the churches that he established in the different cities and different areas of the continent, his message has always been the same. And in chapter 3, which, as I said earlier, is the last chapter of Titus, he is kind of like giving him, at least in the beginning, a pep talk. In that he tells him the various things that the followers, the discipleship, the walk of discipleship, the followers of Christ, the types of things that they need to do and not do. You know, he tells them it's interesting because he does tell them to obey the rules of the authorities, which kind of flies in the face of the message that Christianity brought in these different areas that they weren't used to.
Right.
And the fact that the authorities oftentimes were going after the Christian leaders because they didn't particularly care for them stirring up the people to really begin to think for themselves.
But at the same point, even Christ, who, when he was pushed and backed into a corner, asked the priest, the chief priest, whose head was on the coin,
Right.
and when he answered Caesar's, Christ told him to render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, and God that which is God's.
Right.
So even Christ told the people to obey the laws of the land.
Right. Which sometimes creates a dichotomy in an individual from the standpoint that the greed of many of the political leaders of the different areas where the church was ever, where Christianity was ever established, they were not honorable people. They were not honorable men.
No, not at all.
And it's kind of hard. I'm having trouble putting into words what the thought is in my head here. In one breath, he's telling them not to do the things that they do, but in the next breath, he says, however, obey the laws of the land.
Right.
So there's a little irony there, because does obeying the laws of the land interfere with my walk of discipleship? And this is where one needs to stop and consider the fact that they should not navigate this on their own. because I said it last week, nothing is opened by mistake as often as one's mouth. And sometimes you can say things that in your mind are harmless, but in the mind of somebody else that hears it, it is inflammatory and can create all kinds of problems. So this is where wisdom and discernment come into play in this walk of discipleship. You know, what are the situations where I can be free to express my devotion to a life with Christ? And where are those situations where I just need to kind of keep it to myself? And choose words that aren't going to be taken in a way that's going to get me or the whole concept of Christianity in trouble.
Well,
So-
and the thing of it is you never know just what something that is harmless to
Right.
you isn't harmless to somebody else.
Right.
You know, back in the 70s, GM had a car called, most of us know, called the Nova.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when they marketed that car to Mexico, and they didn't change the name, they just sent it down to Mexico. Well, the problem was the Nova in Spanish meant no go.
Meant what?
No go.
No gold?
No go.
Geo?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, no gold. All right.
Well, not exactly what you want a car, the name of a car to be.
Right. Yeah, I just bought a no gold.
Yeah. Gerber Foods, baby food. When they marketed baby food, Gerber has always had that little baby on the.
Right.
Well, a lot of, we forget that there's a lot of population throughout the world that is illiterate.
True.
So they rely on pictures.
Right.
Well, some of these illiterate areas where the people aren't educated saw this baby's picture and thought that there were babies.
I could see that.
So things that we will see as harmless
Right.
aren't necessarily interpreted harmlessly
Right.
by the person receiving the message.
Exactly.
So we have to be very careful when we deliver that message.
Right.
And that's what Paul's telling Titus.
Especially in an area where it isn't necessarily, any kind of religion.
Right.
In some areas, I don't know what Crete was like at the time, but in some areas, any form of religion is not really welcomed.
Right.
And we know that in many areas, Christianity was absolutely not welcomed. And so, the fish, for example, that was a sign that the Christians would use to tell one another, hey, we're believers.
Right.
And, they had to resort to those kinds of things is what I'm saying. And so, yeah, we need to obey the authorities in terms of following the laws, But in so doing, if we're going to walk the walk of discipleship, we cannot we can't not be a Christian.
But he also reminds Titus where they came from.
Mm-hmm.
Because he reminds Titus, he says, for we ourselves were once foolish, disobedient, led astray, slaves to various passions and pleasures, passing our days in malice and envy, despicable, hating one another.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
So Paul reminds Titus
That they were once like that.
Yeah, it wasn't all that long ago that we were the exact same way those people are.
Right.
And we can't forget that we were where they are at one point.
Right.
And he says, but when the goodness and loving kindness of our God Savior appeared, he saved us, not because of any works of righteousness that we had done, but according to his mercy, through the water of rebirth and the renewal of the Holy Spirit.
Right.
So he goes on to say that it's only because of God, it's only because of Jesus Christ that we are saved. And it isn't because we did anything.
Right.
We didn't do anything.
Quite the opposite.
Right. So and one reason I think Paul's doing that is we need to be humble.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times, I talk with people, I talk with other Christians, not just in this church, but all sorts of denominations.
Right.
And we talk about the homeless problem or any number of social problems that we have in society right now. And it's always, I don't know if I could work volunteer in a soup kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know if I could do that.
A lot of times it's easier to contribute materially to these different places that provide services for the homeless than it is to provide service to these institutions.
Well, because we don't have to be humble to do that.
Right.
I can write a check and donate $500.
Right.
But I don't have to look that homeless guy that homeless person in the eyes.
Right.
I don't have to encounter them in person.
Right.
Where if I volunteer a couple of hours of my time,
Mm-hmm.
I got to spend time with those people. I remember a couple of years ago, Tracy, Patty, Rebecca, and myself, I think it was just the four of us, Tracy cooked a bunch of mastacholi, and we basically cooked a dinner. And we took it down to a homeless shelter in Detroit. And we served dinner. and we actually had to serve the dinner. And so these people are coming through, and these are all homeless people.
Mm-hmm.
These aren't people who are low income and just need some help with groceries. These are people who have no place to live.
Yeah, they have nothing.
And it was the most humble experience I have ever had to look across a serving table
Mm-hmm.
at somebody who I knew was homeless,
Mm-hmm.
and they were grateful that we took time out of our day to feed them dinner.
Exactly.
And I have donated money, and I have donated, because we do our backpacks, we do, Thanksgiving dinners and stuff here that we,
Provide a Christmas for a couple of families, right?
yeah, so I participate in those events, but nothing touched me. More than Jennifer was there too, weren't you?
Where?
In Detroit, at the homeless shelter.
No. I
Oh.
was at Mid-City. We did
Oh,
the
okay.
Mid-City Nutrition to
Yeah.
bag up all the lunches
Yeah,
and stuff, and we
that's
handed
right.
those out.
Yeah. But it's different. It was different.
Yeah. It goes back to what we've said many times before, especially this is one of your favorite sayings is, walk the walk, talk the talk.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, you can talk the talk with a check or with some cash,
Right.
but you're not walking the walk until you're down at that soup kitchen, putting food on somebody's tray that probably is the only thing they've eaten that day, and maybe even in days, plural.
Right.
Whole different experience.
It is, and it reminds you, for me, it reminded me that we're only one personal crisis
Mm-hmm.
away from being those people.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And that's what Paul wants Titus to remember,
Exactly.
because it makes you, it humbles you in a way that you can't explain when all of a sudden it's something that you're faced with.
Right.
You can read about it all you want, and it may have an impact on your life. You can pick up a newspaper.
It might move you
Right,
to donate.
right,
But again, donating and actually being there to give,
right,
and you can't help but have that feeling of, for me, it's such gratitude that I have been blessed, that I haven't had to face the hardships that these individuals are faced with minute by minute, second by second, day after day. So it makes me feel gratitude that I don't have to go through that. And yet I get that feeling of sort of fulfillment that I know that I am doing what the Lord has instructed us to do, what the Lord is instructing Titus to do, and that is to serve.
Right.
Servanthood. If there is a common thread in Christ's ministry and what he taught his disciples, his followers, what he tried to instill in with the apostles, and then even when he died on the cross, he asked God to forgive them because they didn't understand what they were doing. I mean, there's no way of getting more humble than that. And the feeling that one gets when they just do a simple act of kindness to another individual, there's no way you can put a price tag on that. And that is when we're walking the walk. That's what you get.
Right.
You get that feeling. And it's not boastful. It's not puffed up. It is a genuine feeling. To me, I get a feeling of compassion. Because even though I've not been in these people's footsteps, I can see their footsteps.
Right.
And I can sympathize with their situation. And I always leave when I'm in those kind of situations wishing I could have done more. Every time.
I remember, today's Veterans Day. So, I remember what Allied vehicles and forces were rolling into Kuwait City during Desert Storm. There were periods of time when the Kuwaiti people, the vehicles had to come to a stop because the Kuwaiti people had just flooded the roads to the point where we just couldn't go. We couldn't move anywhere. And it's not a feeling of patting yourself on the back.
Mm-mm.
It's a feeling of, I stood up for somebody who couldn't stand up for themselves.
Yeah.
I stood in the shoes I stood in so that these people could live their lives.
Exactly.
And that's what it's like. And when we as Christians step out and serve people, we get that same satisfaction.
Absolutely.
We get that same feeling. I remember the feeling that I felt. My first baptism when I was as performing my first baptism was actually Scott. He was my first baptism. And
Yeah, I remember that.
And
Well, he surprised everybody.
he did, he
At dinner the
at
night
dinner
before.
then,
Right.
yeah, so, but I remember the feeling of humbleness
Mhm.
and the feeling of being grateful that I could serve.
Mhm.
And it's a feeling that whenever we as Christians step out of our buildings, we get out of our lazy boys and our pews and we step into a world of service,
Mhm.
serving each other. It's a feeling of warmth. It's a
Right.
feeling of wholeness.
Right.
And that's what Paul wants Titus to understand.
Right.
And that's what he wants Titus to teach the people.
Right. I had a student when I was probably about midway through my career, somewhere around there. 7th grade class. And I don't know if it was the beginning of the school year or the beginning of the new semester. But, you know, most of the people that are listening know that my career, I was a phys ed teacher. And one of the things that gym teachers ended up having to deal with is our class sizes weren't 25, 26, 7 students. Our class sizes were anywhere from 35 to 45. So, taking roll every day. If I called off each person's name, they would have gotten dressed, came out, I called roll. By the time it was done, it was time for them to go back in and shower and get ready to go home, or go to their next class,
Right.
So I used to just give them numbers and tell them to line up and count off. And, you know, 1, 2, 3, 5. Whoops, there wasn't a 4. So I look at my grade book and see who 4 was, call their name. You know, sometimes they just were, you know, in la la land, or sometimes, or most of the time, no, they just weren't there. So then I knew to mark them absent. I could take roll, just like that. Well, had everything set up, I tell the kids to take roll. We got into the mid-teens, and number was skipped. So I turned and I looked, and I could see that the person that had that number was standing there. And of course, like I said, this is a new year, you know, new semester, whether it's at the beginning of the school year or beginning of the second semester.
Right.
So I've got to be the boss, right? So I go up to this kid and I said, hey, you're here, give me your number. He doesn't say anything to me. Ignores me. Now I'm getting irritated. And I said, look, we're going to have a problem here, pal, if you're not going to cooperate. And he went and turned his back on me. And that just infuriated me. And I was so angry that I left the class and went down to the office because I wanted this clown out of my class. I wasn't going to put up with his nonsense. And the assistant principal hears me talking to the counselor, and she says, oh, wait a minute, Lyle, wait a minute. She said, I forgot to tell you. This student, Jeff Fleming, yeah, he's a selective mute. A what? A selective mute. What the Sam Hill is that? Well, he only talks to people he feels like talking to. And I gotta put up with this? Well, yeah, he's gotta have Jim, and so that required me to have to give this kid out of 40 some other ones this special attention. And I was not a happy camper. But as the days went on, I could see that this kid was a very troubled young man. So I began to take off my blinders and look further into what was going on with this kid. And I went down to the counselor. I said, "What's this kid's story?" And she said, "Lyle, you're not going to believe it. It's so sad. He was born to a drug addict mother who wanted nothing to do with him. So he ended up being brought up by his grandmother who wanted nothing to do with him. He didn't have decent clothes, so he was picked on. And on it went. And one of the requirements that we had was students had to have gym shoes. We couldn't have them wearing street shoes on the gym floor because they would leave all kinds of marks on the wooden floor.
Right.
And there was no way that this kid was ever going to wear gym shoes. So he just kept sitting out. I wouldn't let him participate. Well, after I talked with the counselor, come to find out, the grandmother, the clothes that he got were clothes that the grandmother had been given from people who understood the situation and gave clothes that were used to give to him.
Right.
And that was the only pair of shoes he had, was what he had on his feet. So finally, I said, okay. I took $20 out of my pocket, and I took him, got permission to take him out of school, down to Kmart, which was only about 2 miles from the school. And back then, $20 would be almost like $100 today. And I got him 3 shirts that were contemporary.
Right.
3 pair of jeans, got him some socks, got him some underwear, got him some tennis shoes and stuff. Well, then I became his best friend. Now, this is when he's in 7th grade. And by the time he finished his 9th grade year, they made sure that he was in my class all 3 years. I couldn't get the kid to shut up. Now, I'm telling this story because if I hadn't dug deeper into the situation, I could have remained angry at this kid. It had been very easy to do, and I would have been treating him no different than anybody else treated him, including his grandmother, who he had to live with every day of his life. And I can't tell you, when I saw him walk out of the school for the last time, knowing that he was going to be going over to the high school, a tear went down my cheek, because I was going to miss Jeff. That's humility. That's humility. And I still, as I'm telling this story, I'm getting goosebumps. But this is a walk of this is the walk of Christian discipleship. That's the walk.
Right. And that's the walk that we're called to take every day.
But here's my point. We can't as a Christian, we can't take everything at face value.
Right.
And when we are troubled about something or someone, the Christian has to dig deeper
Right.
to try and understand why the individual is like they are.
Right.
What did Christ do? When he came upon those individuals who were poor, who were crippled, he didn't just, I'm glad I'm not you. Terrible to be you. What does the scripture say? He had compassion. And he met whatever need they had at that particular moment. We can do that. We can. We have the capacity to do that. But the question, the dilemma that we are faced with every single day of our life, are we willing to do it?
It's a matter of meeting people where they're at.
Absolutely.
The homeless person, meeting them where they're at.
Absolutely.
The drug addict, meeting them where they're at.
Oh, it is so easy to, what is the matter with you? Can't you get yourself together?
Right.
You weak individual.
Meeting the Jeffs of the world.
Exactly.
Where they're at. That's what it's all about. That's the message that Paul was trying to get through.
Absolutely.
And he told Titus, he says, I want you to insist that people do these things and they devote themselves to doing good works.
Exactly.
But he also tells them, but avoid stupid controversies, genealogies, dissensions, and quarrels about the law, for they are unprofitable and worthless.
Just like I was when I left that gym and ran down to the office to complain to the administrators that they had to get this nut job out of my class. My first reaction.
Yeah. In my years as a firefighter, I couldn't tell you how many times, and I'm not proud of it, I'm guilty of it. I couldn't tell you how many times we would get a call, and the call would be for a house that we go to all the time. And we call them frequent flyers. And you get there, and it's usually, not always, but probably 95% of the time, it's an elderly person.
Mm-hmm.
And you get upset. You get frustrated. You're like, oh, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. You got me out of bed. Yada, yada, yada. Now looking back at it, being retired, and looking back at it, I think to myself, how many of those people were calling 911 because they were lonely?
Mm-hmm.
Because they were scared.
All the above.
Because there was something in their lives that they just couldn't handle.
It was missing.
Right. And time to stop and think about that. All I thought about was how they're inconveniencing me because I gotta get up out of bed at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
You know, we're all guilty of doing that.
Yep.
You know, how many times in today's society, how many times do we get in arguments over politics?
Oh, yeah.
Over,
I'm guilty of it.
you know, and at the end of the day, it's unproductive. Just like
Oh,
Paul says.
It's unproductive, but we've taken the time and created idle time out of it, because it was idle time because what was accomplished?
Right, nothing.
Absolutely. In the end, the only thing that happens is the individual's vent, and they walk away still feeling the way they felt when the whole thing began.
Right. And
But when we do the bidding of the Lord, when we do good works in His name, we walk away with a feeling of accomplishment.
right.
And that is so much better
Well,
than to walk away and thinking to ourselves, what a dipstick. This person just doesn't get it.
a word that I really come to appreciate is attunement.
Atonement?
Attunement.
Attunement.
And it's when we take time to feel what somebody else is feeling,
Mm-hmm.
to really reach out to them, not in a physical way, but in a psychological way,
Mm-hmm.
to empathize with them and to really feel what they're feeling.
Right.
You know, I have really, over the last couple of years, especially this last year, while I was working through my internships, I really learned to appreciate that word. And in the beginning, I didn't really realize how powerful of a word it is until later in the process, the last couple of months, I've really began to appreciate just how powerful that is.
Right.
When we take time to be willing to feel what somebody else is feeling, to experience life as they see life.
Right.
And when we do that, it creates this symbiotic relationship
Mm-hmm.
that meets both of our needs.
Absolutely.
You know, but as Paul said, you know, it doesn't always work. You know, and sometimes in unfortunately, even in the Christian world, we run into those people who, and Paul, the church in Corinth had people who struggled with this a lot. People who just want to create division,
Mm-hmm.
who just want to keep throwing a monkey wrench in the program.
Right.
You know, and in the last part of this chapter I want to talk about, Paul says, after a first and second admonition, have nothing more to do with anyone who causes division. since you know that such a person is perverted and sinful, being self-condemned. We've got to recognize when that person is just creating division because they want to create division. There's always, unfortunately, there's always those people out there who they're miserable, so they want to make everybody else miserable.
Absolutely.
And we've got to learn that, listen, we've talked to them a couple of times, we've done everything we can do, and they're just keeping doing it.
Right.
We've got to learn to say, you know what, God bless you, and move on about our business.
Absolutely.
You know, because there's more lives out there that need to be saved.
Right.
And if we spend all of our time focusing on somebody who really doesn't want to be saved,
Right.
the people that want it, the sheep, the one sheep that wandered off, that really didn't want to wander off, but wandered off,
Lost its way.
that sheep will never get found, but will never save the one who doesn't want to be saved.
That's right. That is absolutely right. And there's so many times when we have to come to the realization and the feeling of, it's okay. I've done my best. I can do no more. The rest is up to that person. And it's okay.
Right.
Because I've given the Lord my reasonable service. And I cannot take away that other person's agency.
I had, during my internships, once a week I have to sit down with my supervisor, and I have an hour of supervision with my supervisor. Yesterday I sat down with him for an hour, and one of the conversations we had was how I've gotten better at, because it's all about how I'm improving and where I can work, and you know. So he commented. He said, one thing you've gotten better at is learning to say, I've done all I can do.
Right.
There's nothing else I can do.
Right.
And closing that person's case. And he commented, he said, that's tough for a Christian to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's not how we think.
Well, that's not what we're taught.
No. We're taught that we're supposed to save everybody.
Right.
And so it's tough to sit there and say, I just had it happen about the middle of November. I had a case, I had a client come in who was coming in for substance abuse, and he had just been released from prison, and part of his parole was he had to participate in substance abuse counseling.
Okay.
Well, so I had to report to his parole officer.
Mm-hmm.
We really, I met with him twice, and that was it. And so I had to discharge him.
Okay.
And it was tough. But what, because everything in me wanted to save him.
Right.
Everything in me wanted him to be the poster child for turning your life around.
Right.
Not for me, but for him.
Right.
Because I wanted to see him be a success.
I agree.
Everything in me said that. The pastor in me, the counselor in me, the Christian in me, the man who my parents raised me to be. Everything in me screamed that. But at the end of the day, he had to make the choice.
Absolutely.
And we've got to be okay with understanding that some people aren't going to make the choice we want them to make.
No,
And that's okay.
it is okay.
It's okay. Because it's not about the ones who we reach out to and they don't accept the good news. They don't accept a relationship with Jesus Christ. It's not about them.
Right.
It's about the ones that we reach out to that do accept that relationship.
It does respond. Exactly.
Those are the ones it's about.
Yeah.
The ones who don't, they're going to have to answer for that choice.
Yes, they will.
So that's their choice.
Yes, it is.
And that's how Paul closes out this letter,
Yep.
is reminding them that some people they're not going to accept what you have to offer.
Right.
And it's okay. Try a couple of times and at some point you just gotta say, it's okay.
Right.
They're going to deal with what they have to deal with for their choices.
Exactly.
You know,
Because your responsibility is to minister to the whole, and this is how he closes it out, to the whole flock,
right?
not just the one that you gave your best shot to, but just refuse to respond.
Right. So that is Titus. And we will, so as, I don't, some of you may have missed the announcement. Bud is going in 1 week from today. So
Yep.
Next Tuesday, everybody keep Bud in your prayers.
Please.
He is going in to have his gallbladder surgically removed.
Right.
So we will be taking, I would venture to say, probably 2 weeks, if not,
That's what I was thinking.
probably 2 weeks we will be taking off. And so we will, he's got to have time to heal and kind of get his strength back and stuff like that, so.
Well, the thing is, when I get home, I want to make sure that I'm sure that I'm going to be weak.
Oh, yeah.
And my immune system is going to be affected, so
Yeah.
I'm going to want to be,
Yeah, just
careful
careful.
about where I go and how long I'm there
Right.
until at least I get the stitches and stuff out,
So, Bud is asking for prayers, and in case you missed it, Wendy announced that her daughter Jada, she actually left today for Great Lakes Naval Station. So she is left today for Navy boot camp.
in Great Lakes.
Yep.
Yeah.
So Wendy is asking that you keep Jada and keep Wendy in your prayers, because she's going to be the nervous Nelly too. So keep Wendy and Jada both in your thoughts and prayers as Jada works her way through boot camp for the Navy and enters into her a career with the Navy. Other than that, I don't have any other announcements, so we will collude. I'm starting to talk. I had a butt moment. We will conclude this evening's Bible study, and we will see you in a couple of weeks with a much healthier bud.
Absolutely.